the inevitability of the collapse of the totalitarian system. So, well, here's the thesis right away after what we have studied. Let's put it this way. Does God need this totalitarian system? What do you think after what we have learned? If every person is undoubtedly a child of God, every person is unique, and if there is a divine purpose, then did God intend such a system? No. Therefore, this system is objectively coming to an end. And now we will look at what leads to the inevitability of the collapse, what it consists of. The families of the elite are subject to general biological laws. Therefore, among 1,000 isolated children and 1,000 children from the crowd, there is the same number of gifted ones, that is, those capable of thoughtfully acquiring knowledge. Remember, we discussed the law of normal distribution. That is, 5% are exceptionally smart, 5% are not very smart, and 80–90% are ordinary, normal people. This applies to both the elite and the crowd. The clannish isolation of the elite, their permissiveness, and elite ambitions predetermine the composition of managers from your ranks. That is, legalized heredity. And just now we discussed these presidents of the CIS and so on. In other words, they all strive. Bush or not Bush, it's still Bush. So, his father was the President of the United States. This is not only the case with us, in other words, there are ambitions. But there are no abilities. This causes a decrease in the quality of management of social processes. Well, in particular, this also led to stagnation. After all, what was it like under Brezhnev, and so on? This top echelon of the Central Committee of the Communist Party, they all intertwined in their clannish, so to speak, dynastic marriages and so on. But they cannot manage. Stalin, like Papa Carlo, worked from morning till night, so to speak. He didn't know sleep at night, and knew each designer by name and patronymic. And what did Yeltsin know there, besides the glass, so to speak, and everyone around him, so to speak, was drinking, with rare exceptions. Thus the quality of management decreased, and under Brezhnev it was the same as it was under Khrushchev. Therefore, the inability of the elite to maintain the necessary qualities of management led to two phenomena. The process of expanding the social base of managers is going against the ambitions and opinion of Chumas. It cannot. Why is this process happening? Because life demands it. That is, the matrix. Remember the matrix we discussed? This encompassing one. It forces the resolution of tasks set by the hierarchically higher encompassing management. And the proof of this is that in difficult times, in Russia in particular, there always appeared Ilyich, Muromtsi, Lomonosov, Stalin, and so on. Frunze, who did more than the elite, and much more. The elite could not, but they did. After all, where did Stalin come from? From a simple family. And where did the Lomonosovs come from? And so on. To maintain its dominance, the priesthood, the pseudo-priesthood, is forced to ensure the necessary qualities of governance in society at a global level. For this, a special mechanism has been developed. Here we are again at this mechanism. So, the circumcision of the elite, so to speak. That is, Judaism is again a hostage here. They need to understand this, since the main personnel base is at the level of Judaism. What is being done? A revolutionary situation is being created. The people are smashing. The clueless elite. And, as in the song by Mikhail Ivanovich Nozhkin, we were assigned a new boss, and we went home with that. So, the elite is being cut off and destroyed by the crowd, and a new one is appointed. If these lectures are being given now, June, the beginning of June 2004. So I just received an article about the elite from Moscow on one of the websites. It is openly stated there that the current elite must be completely destroyed. They are useless, meaning they have not been able to accomplish anything. Who is doing this? Does this person understand what they have written or not? But the fact is that they are working for the global mafia. That is, they need to be cut out, removed, taken down. And it is proven throughout, as if referring to history, yes, referring to what has always been in Russia. The article specifically states that in 1917, the Russian elite could do nothing. Yes, led by Nikolashko, this sovereign emperor, and they were destroyed. Then the Stalinist elite was destroyed. They do not see what is missing in this article. Understanding of who organizes this process. That is, they state the obvious, but they do not understand that this process is managed. This is the understanding of global politics, the society's recognition of the permissibility of permissiveness. This recognition is a disease of the spirit, a disease of worldview, a disease of perception. But it is precisely this permissiveness that lies at the core of a totalitarian society. And what is a disease always? It does not allow one to master the global, or rather genetically determined potential. That is, a sick person is ill, they cannot develop. So, a totalitarian society is essentially a disease of humanity. And further from where we started the question, does God need all of this to exist? No. Therefore, humanity is a biological species, and its fate can only be the same as that of other biological species, either a dead-end path of evolution, leading to a very painful death for humanity, or prolonged existence, but then we must engage in mastering the genetically determined potential for development, occupy a stable place in the biosphere, and create conditions for the further evolution of the biosphere. What path are we currently developing on? The first one, a dead-end path. Everyone talks, but no one wants to take action. The concept of public safety leads humanity down this path and justifies it. The mechanism of self-destruction of a totalitarian society and its culture, what does it consist of? The harmony of the biosphere is the harmony of some eating others, no species. No species can consume more than what the productivity of the biosphere provides. That is, we cannot take more than what exists on Earth. Yes, as much as there are forests, we cannot cut down more, we cannot get it from anywhere else. In other words, what exists on Earth is what is allotted to us. The productivity of the biosphere is limited across all food chains. It is subordinated to the energetic and informational rhythms of the cosmos, and supports the fluctuations in the population of all species within the limits of stable evolution. Endless. The level of consumption and the list of needs of individuals of any species, calculated over their entire life cycle, is constant, in a statistical sense. This applies to hares, wolves, rams, hedgehogs, and other living creatures on Earth. The situation changed with the emergence of humans. Why? Because the list of their needs has changed throughout the global historical process. And humans are the only species in the biosphere that determine some of their needs themselves and choose the measure. That is, how much from the way of extracting from nature what they consider necessary for themselves. What products does he, and on what basis does he count? And again we go out. Either to ensure a genetically determined potential, then it's one situation. But if he says, today I want this, and tomorrow I want that, I want to drive a black car in the morning, a red one in the evening, a lilac one at lunch, and a blue one after lunch, like many do now. That is, a car is not a means of transportation, but a luxury. And then there is a grind to have these cars. Is he going to extract more land? I want to have an apartment in Moscow, a castle outside Moscow, a summer house in the Canaries. But where is the brick? From what? And the land, and the forest. And fashion? What is it? Today a short skirt, tomorrow a long one. He still wears it, carries it, he throws it away. There is a grind of what exists, that is, all culture, is going towards the grinding of the planet's resources. This is jumping ahead. When we talk about the economy, there are needs that are demographically determined. That is, for a person to realize their genetically determined potential And there are degradation parasitic needs, when, what else do I want? And here, let's give me a golden toilet. And instead of spending gold on something, he makes toilets out of it. They are needed. But this consumes resources, and so on. This is called a degradation parasitic need. But he can do this thoughtfully and responsibly. Thoughtfully, permissively, and mindlessly. That is to extract all of this from nature, and the situation qualitatively changed by the end of the 19th century. When culture became a decisive factor, that is, technology appeared, and technology began to exert a destructive pressure on the biosphere. What is this all about? These globalizers already understood by the end of the 19th century that the so-called capitalist system, capitalism, lifted the ban on people consuming material goods. That is, from the verbal system, which was before, well, the landowners. So the landowners build new castles and carriages for themselves, while the peasants have only cabbage soup and porridge, our food. Oh, my bast shoes. That is, a limitation in consumption. With the development of capitalism, merchants and entrepreneurs emerged from the people, and they all watched the film The Gloomy River, and so on, and they said, I also want to be like that one. And they also began to build castles and palaces for themselves. The globalizers realized that if this continues, the land will be gnawed away, and it will be devoured in just a few years. And this situation became the basis for the decision to restrain the percentage of consumption of material goods by people. For this purpose, Marxism became very suitable and convenient. So, with his understanding of happiness and so on, it was then that the decision was made and approval was given for the World Revolution. And with the launch of the World Revolution, our country became the launching pad for this. Therefore, Ilyich appeared, Ilya Bodavidovich. One came from Switzerland in a sealed carriage, another was brought by steamboat. And they were supposed to start the so-called permanent revolution, authored by Ilya Bodavidovich. And you remember there was a revolution in Mexico, in Hungary, in China, in Mongolia at that time, in Germany. That is, it was supposed to transition from the Russian Revolution to a world revolution. But Lenin, with the conclusion of the Brest Peace, interrupted this process, for which he was destroyed. That is, by the hands of Nadezhda Konstantinovna, what kind of little pill he was given, why Lenin's brain dried up, and so on. That is, after Lenin, the management of the country was supposed to be taken over by Leba Bodavidovich. Why? Because Leba, the author of the permanent revolution, but conducting is not algebra, and he was not able to foresee the case of a powerful instantaneous tool for implementation. God sees, Leba fell ill, and the management of the country was taken over by Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin, who was embedded in this Marxist movement. So, there are very serious grounds to believe this, the main intelligence directorate of the Russian army. And Stalin, finding himself in this situation, while the entire management corps was not his, being made up of Strakists, therefore Stalin was not actually the master of the country until the beginning of the war. Only after the Battle of Kursk did he become the master of the situation. But before that, the Strakists were everywhere. All the commissioners, prosecutors, everyone was from this Jewish mafia, the commissioners. The heads of the gulags, that's what Stalin nurtured. What does the youth know now? Stalin, Beria, Gulag, Stalin, Beria, Gulag. They know nothing else. But if we look from the perspective of the departure of things, as Alexander Sergeyevich said, I remind you, fate is not algebra. The human mind is not a prophet. In popular terms, not a prophet, but a guesser. He sees the general code of things and can draw significant conclusions from it, often justified by time. But I won't let him foresee the case of a powerful instantaneous instrument of fate. Here, so to speak, Stalin completely coincides under consideration. After all, from the perspective of the optics of the departure of things, what do we have? Stalin inherited a defeated, shattered side after Lenin. After Stalin, there remained a superpower, number one, number two. It depends on how one counts. By the growth rates, The USSR was already outpacing the United States during Stalin's time. Personally, after Stalin, he had neither summer houses in the Canaries nor anything else. He had one everyday suit, a ceremonial one, worn-out goat leather shoes, boots, and darned socks. That's all. Vanka is now currently ending his life in one of the homes as a waitress for the elderly. And those great democratizers, Yeltsin and so on, destroyed the country. They have summer houses and everything else. Who is the manager then? Who is humane? They are now making schools for the masses, for the elite, and so on. During Stalin's time, education was accessible to everyone. The only thing they accuse him of is the gulags. But the gulags were not Stalin's doing. It was the Jews. Why? Because when the Jews come to power, they are united. But when they achieve power, they argue among themselves. And during that period, there were two factions that opposed each other. On one side was the Jewish clan of Kamenev-Zinoviev, and on the other, Trotsky. Look at the newspapers of those years. They were attacking each other, and it was simply impossible to stop it. Stalin did not interfere. All the heads of the gulags were Jews. And what about now? What is happening now if we compare this to Putin? There are also two clans, the Yeltsin clan and the Lushkov clan. And they are attacking each other, betraying each other, sabotaging each other. It's a process of concentration while they were robbing the country. So, the field of robbery was vast, and regional clans were forming. Which ones? Those who robbed at the regional level were the Yeltsin family. The regions were robbing at the regional level. And Lushkov, well, while in Moscow, while the field of activity was vast, everything was going well. But when the robbery ended, the borders touched and the interests began to intersect. And it all started, shootings, redistributions, and so on. And there will be no end to these redistributions. Because if this happened in the West for centuries, Morgan was a pirate, people got used to it, and so on. And here a pirate goes boom bang, and in a year he became a billionaire. And the others watch and think, well, okay, I'm a calm person. But the troublesome one, so to speak, will say, what about me? I want the same. And then it went piff-paff, oh. So there will be no end to this. Therefore, our elite will not be able to stabilize. They are trying to keep this, and it won't succeed. There will always be new Tolya Bykov and so on. And what happened to Tolya and Bykov? A Russian guy, under this noise, took and grabbed himself an aluminum plant. He surrounded it with barbed wire, put armed guards in the corners and said, don't come near. What to do? What is it, Russian Vanya? Do you want to have something here? No. They supply the same Alexander Ivanovich. Alexander Ivanovich Lebed is twisting Tolya Bykov's head. And now the question is, does this backstage need Alexander Ivanovich or not? Not needed. That's why Alexander Ivanovich didn't become one. And this will go on endlessly. All these electoral procedures have the same purpose. So, why? Because if you put one in place and he does well, then he will rule for a long time. But we need to, if he acts in the interests of the people, therefore, after a certain time, we need to re-elect through electoral procedures. Why re-elect if he is governing normally? We need to re-elect. And I have already told you, for example, in Madrid, how this national government, which acted in the interests of the Spaniards, governed the country. So it is not needed by this global mafia. They need to conduct policies not in the interests of the Spaniards, but in the interests of certain circles. How to remove it? They blow up trains, the people are driven out into the streets, meaning the people protest against the government and choose a government that will work against the people. In us, like monads, this is outraged. Why do the people in Russia not go out when explosions are heard here? And that's because our people understand much better. They are moving away from this semi-totalitarian society. Very interesting processes are happening in Russia. But we got a little sidetracked, although I think this is a very important point in understanding these processes. That is, this mother understood back in the 19th century that capitalism lifted the ban, and she is working on limitation. I will mention another very important point. the system of Wahhabism also works on this. What is Wahhabism? It is Trotskyism in Islam. So what do the followers of Wahhab say? And Wahhab was, well, one of the ideologists of Islam after Muhammad. He said that one must fight for justice, must limit oneself, live according to the Quran, and so on. The English? Spy Lawrence distorted the teachings of Wahhabism to serve the interests of the global elite. And what are the Wahhabis doing now? They say that one must fight for justice, must limit oneself to little, wear just one outfit, to eat little, not to drink, not to smoke, to work well. The people support them. They say, expropriation of the expropriators, the rich should not exist. That is to say, they say that the fiery revolutionaries in the Islamic world are Trotskyists. So, they are being used. They do not grasp global politics. Therefore, they address the issue of limiting people's consumption of material goods. And what was the result of this position for us? Our fathers and grandfathers in the everyday life of great construction projects. They built the Sayano-Shushenskaya hydroelectric power station, the Dobratskaya hydroelectric power station, the LAI 500, the difficult line. They mastered all this, built living space, bam. So, power plants, power transmission lines, they mastered powerful spaces, and now all of this is passing into the hands of the global backstage. Here is your understanding of global politics. But what I wanted to say is that during this construction, look, not at feature films, but at the newsreels of those years. And you will see the happy eyes of happy people. That is, they joyfully built this future. This is exactly what globalizers need, so that people do not understand what is happening and work with enthusiasm. In the interests of the global backstage, after completing their task, they are removed, then a new period of construction begins, and so on. This is global politics. So, phobism is not just some fans and so on. They are fueled, which is why Osama bin Laden and all these others have money. They keep it where necessary. All of this is a controlled process. They are used when necessary, used for terrorist acts, that is, to scare, intimidate, and drive people towards fascism. Through whom? Through Islamic fundamentalists. And if we talk Old Testament fundamentalism, what I quoted from Deuteronomy, Isaiah, can you imagine the dominance of some over others there? It's more intense than Islamic fundamentalism, Old Testament fundamentalism.